The film's story begins with the mail carrier arriving at a secluded house deep within the forest to deliver a package. The carrier knocks, but no one answers. At that moment, he spots a woman inside washing clothes stained with blood. The carrier then walks around the house and hears a sound coming from the cellar opening. He opens the cellar door, looks inside, and sees a person locked up there. The carrier tries to help him, extending his hand, but the trapped person cannot grasp it. The carrier goes outside to call for help, but suddenly, he is mysteriously pulled into the cellar. 30 years after this incident, we see a tour company bus arriving in the forest, bringing a group of young people for a camping trip. As soon as they arrive, their cell phones and all electronic devices are confiscated. The trip organizer explains to the youth that the goal of this journey is to disconnect them from the internet, which is why their devices were taken. He also warns them that they might encounter wild animals or potentially dangerous, insane inhabitants of the forest. The next day, the adventures begin. We see the guide, Izia, approaching her group, which consists of 3 young men and 2 girls. She tells them they will be hiking through the forest for 3 days, and they must stay close together and not lose sight of each other, even if they run into trouble. They set off and start walking through the woods. Along the way, Bartek begins to verbally harass Daniel. Daniel pushes him, causing Bartek to fall and injure his leg. Izia attends to the wound, and they continue their journey. Suddenly, Julek stumbles upon a dead deer. They feel fear, as many people have disappeared in the Polish forests. Izia reassures them, saying animals do not attack without reason. Zasa looks up at the trees and catches sight of a hand being pulled up into one, but she ignores what she saw and continues with the group. They eventually reach the camping spot and set up their tents. At night, they build a fire and sit around chatting. The guide asks Julek why he came to this place. Julek explains that he was the second best football player in Poland, has a famous channel, and was planning to travel to Korea to participate in championship matches, but his parents prevented him from using the internet and sent him to this camp. The guide tries to ask Zasa why she came to the camp, but after reading her file, she immediately changes the subject. Suddenly, something swiftly dashes past them. Izia takes a light and gets up to check the area, discovering it was only a small fox. Afterward, they retreat into their tents and fall asleep. Daniel leaves his tent and goes to sit by the lake. Anila comes and sits next to him, and they get to know each other. Anila returns to the tent, leaving Daniel alone. He secretly pulls out the phone he smuggled in and begins browsing the internet. Suddenly, a large, strange-looking man appears, grabs Daniel, and violently slams him against a tree. The film flashes back to the past, where we see Zasa on a road trip with her parents, during which they get into a serious accident mid-journey. In the present, Izia notices Daniel's disappearance and asks Anila about him. Anila tells her the last time she saw him was when he was sitting by the lake. Izia and the others go to the lake. There, Zasa notices blood on a tree and calls everyone to show them. Izia, however, dismisses it, claiming that this type of tree secretes a similar colored sap. Izia then instructs Bartek and Anila to stay at the camp in case Daniel returns, while she, Zasa, and Julek head into the forest to search for Daniel. On the way, Julek expresses his fear, telling them that what is happening to them is exactly what happens at the beginning of horror movies. Izia silences him so he doesn't frighten the others. They continue walking until they reach the killer's house. They knock on the door to ask about Daniel, but no one opens it, leading them to believe the house is abandoned. They open the door and enter, looking around the place. Julek tells them the place is creepy and they should get out quickly. Suddenly, they hear a noise coming from the cellar. Izia opens the cellar door and descends, followed by Zasa, while Julek stays upstairs. Izia and Zasa search the cellar and are horrified when they find Daniel dead, lying on the floor. At the same moment, Julek hears the killer entering the house. He rushes down to the cellar and closes the door behind him. The killer hears a noise from the cellar, opens the door, and descends. Izia emerges to fight the killer, but before leaving, she hears Daniel's phone ringing and decides to take it to call the police. Izia grabs a stick to attack the killer, but tragically, he kills her and throws her severed head outside. Zasa and Julek flee into the forest, terrified and unsure what to do. Zasa suggests to Julek that they return and retrieve Daniel's phone, but Julek refuses out of fear. Meanwhile, Bartek was talking with Anila. Suddenly, the killer arrives and brutally murders Anila. Bartek immediately gets up and runs away. After that, Zasa and Julek arrive at a small house deep in the forest. They go and knock on the door, and an elderly man opens it. They ask him to let them inside, and the man agrees. Once inside, they ask him for a phone to call the police. The elderly man asked Zasa and Julek to tell him exactly what had happened to them. Meanwhile, Bartek reached a church and told the priest everything that had occurred, pleading with him to call the police. The priest claimed he had no cell phone signal, so he would try the landline, explaining that the area was isolated. The priest went and picked up the landline phone but pretended it had no signal, lying to Bartek. He then offered to drive Bartek to the police station himself. Just then, the landline phone suddenly rang. The priest, seeing this, struck Bartek on the head, knocking him to the floor. Later, Bartek regained consciousness to find himself tied up inside the church, with the priest sitting in front of him. The priest heard a noise coming from outside and went out to investigate the source. Suddenly, the killer appeared and brutally murdered the priest in a manner no different from the other victims. At the same moment, Bartek managed to untie the ropes restraining him. He looked out the window and saw the killer was still nearby, so he quickly entered a closet and hid inside. The killer then entered and opened the closet, finding Bartek. Meanwhile, Zasa and Julek told the elderly man about the killer they had encountered. The man showed them his legs and explained that he had lost them because of the killers. Zasa and Julek became even more terrified when they realized there were two killers, not just one. The man began to tell them the story, revealing that a woman once lived near there with her twin sons, leading a peaceful and happy life until a fateful day arrived. That day, the boys were playing outside when they saw a flare or gunshot in the sky. They went to the spot where the shot was fired and found a strangely shaped rock. They took the rock home and placed it under their bed. That night, while the boys were sleeping, the rock moved and a strange substance emerged from it and entered their bodies. This rock transformed them into monsters. The next day, the mother woke up and went to her son's room. She saw the bed was strangely disturbed and noticed bloodstains on the floor. She followed the trail until she reached the cellar, where she saw her sons sitting and eating animal flesh in a bizarre manner. Terrified, she immediately sealed the cellar door. The man continued his story, explaining that the mother chained them up and confined them in the cellar so no one would see them, continuing to feed them while they were restrained. After years passed, the mother lost her mind from living with them. At this point, Zasa told the man that they must contact the police. The man replied that he did not own a phone, but if they wanted to survive the catastrophe, they should stay there. He assured them he had food and a weapon, adding that reaching the nearest village would take a full day. Zasa insisted they would not stay put, saying they had to save themselves. She left the house and told Julek that their only option was to go back and retrieve Daniel's phone. They headed back to the killer's house. The killer was inside the cellar. Julek told Zasa he would make a noise by the door to lure the killer out, allowing her to slip into the cellar. Zasa gave Julek her knife to defend himself. Julek went and knocked loudly on the door, and the killer emerged from the cellar. Zasa entered through the outer door and managed to hit the killer, forcing him to move away from her. However, she fell to the ground and lost consciousness. The killer took the knife from Julek and stabbed him with it. We flash back to the past, before these events, to see Zasa lying on the ground at the accident site. She sees her father's car on fire. Her father tried to save himself, but could not. In the present, Zasa wakes up to find herself bound by chains, and Julek lying on the floor, suffering from the knife wound. She pulls out the phone to call the police, but before she can dial, the battery dies, and the phone shuts off. Zasa breaks down. Julek tells her to take the knife and kill him. Zasa is afraid to pull the knife out of Julek's abdomen, knowing he will die if she does, but Julek insists. She pulls it out, and Julek passes away. Zasa struggles to unlock the chains until she succeeds, freeing herself. She heads to the door to escape, but suddenly hesitates. She goes back, takes the killer's sword, and leaves the cellar through the inner door. She sees the killer sleeping. She quietly approaches and stabs the killer multiple times until he dies. After that, she leaves the house and runs through the forest toward an unknown fate. Meanwhile, The elderly man who let Zasa and Julek into his home hears a sound at his door. Believing the killer has arrived, he prepares his weapon. As the door opens, he fires the weapon, but realizes he has shot Bartek. We learn that Bartek managed to escape from the killer at the church. We now see a police car in the middle of the forest where the officer is sitting and reading a book. Suddenly, Zasa appears, terrified, and asks the officer for help. The officer takes her into his car to drive her out of the forest. Midway, the car hits one of the killers. The officer gets out to check what happened. Zasa tries to stop him, but he ignores her and goes to check on the killer. At that moment, the killer gets up, strikes the officer with a cleaver, and kills him. The killer then moves toward the car. Zasa quickly climbs into the driver's seat and tries to start the car, but she cannot. Suddenly, the killer climbs onto the car and begins striking it with the cleaver. Zasa manages to start the car, causing the killer to fall to the ground. At this moment, Zasa decides to kill him, saving people from him and his evil. She reverses the car strongly and hits him, repeating the action until she kills him. In doing so, she saves her own life and the lives of anyone who might come after her to this cursed forest, whose true nature they never knew. After this terrifying nightmare, she returns home safely. This marks the end of the film.